So everybody probably knows what osteoporosis is, but here's a definition by Dr. Lauren Fishman. Osteoporosis is a disease in which bones become fragile and more likely to break. If not prevented, or if left untreated, osteoporosis can progress painlessly until a fracture occurs. These are typically in the spine, hip, and wrist. So the challenge is the painlessly part, because we don't know if we have it. So, and I myself have never had a DEXA scan. I don't really want to get one. I figure, what's that going to do? Just make me more nervous? So I know people can get afraid when they get a diagnosis of osteoporosis. So I just don't really want to go there myself. But we can all do positive things to improve. So they're measured by a DEXA scan. And that compares your bone mineral mass to women 25 to 30 years old. So that's when the bones are the strongest. And then there's a bell-shaped curve, and that's how they come up with the numbers. Like the T-scale of -1 is osteopenia, and a T-scale of -2.5, that is osteoporosis. So I did take statistics in college, but I really don't remember much of it. It was very boring, but you have the bell-shaped curve, and then the people below, like if you've got the curve here, the people below here, below 1 standard deviation, that's going to be osteopenia, and below 2.5. So farther out, this is the smaller group here, it's about 1% of people, they would have a T-scale score of -2.5. So osteoporosis affects 44 million Americans, and there are 1 million fractures annually. Most are in the spine, and that would be the front of the spine. Causes are hormone changes in midlife, loss of collagen as we age, so the bones get more brittle, lack of exercise, and lack of exercise meaning both when we're growing up and when we're older. So if we had a childhood where we weren't very physically active, we may not have built up a lot of bone. So it's important to exercise when we're younger, but of course we can't go back and redo that. But we can make a difference at the age, whatever age we're at. So dietary influence, that's also involved, like insufficient protein, vitamins, and minerals. And you had a great talk here last week about nutrition. If you missed that, I highly recommend it. You can learn about that. I'm not going to talk about that at all today. So osteocytes, those are the cells that make bone, and osteoclasts dissolve bone. So they're like janitors. They clean up the dead and decayed bone. So osteoclasts kind of have a bad rap because we think, well, that's what's taking away my bone and making my bone weak. But we want to take away bones, parts of bone that are dead, because it's not serving a purpose there. So this gets kind of complicated, and I'm not going to go into the complicated part of it, but bone mineral density. So that's how thick and solid your bones are, the amount of mineral content. Bone quality is different, so that's how resistant your bones are to fracture. It's a better predictor of fracture risk. And that combines the bone mineral density plus things like the quality of the bone, the structure when you look at the bone, so lots of factors involved with that. So osteoporosis drugs. Bisphosphonates, that's the most common class of the drugs. So what they do is they inhibit the resorption or reabsorption of the bone. So they inhibit the osteoclasts, the janitors, the one I was talking about before. And then, unfortunately, dead bone remains rather than being cleaned up. So you might have a DEXA scan that shows that your T-scale has improved, but it may be that some of that bone in there is actually dead. So that's why this is, it's questionable. So repair of damaged bone is also inhibited by these drugs. And then there are potential side effects of the drugs, so GI problems, headaches, particularly concerning spontaneous fractures of the femur or the thigh bone and osteonecrosis of the jawbone. So especially because the drugs are supposed to be preventing fractures. So this is where you have these pluses and you have these minuses. So it's really a mixed bag looking at taking the drugs. So are there other options? Yes, definitely. So nutrition, You can improve the quality of your diet and include specific supplements. You can look at the lecture from last week about that. Exercise, both weight-bearing and yoga, and then healthy postural alignment. So Wolff's Law says that the architectonic of bone follows the lines of force to which that bone is subjected. So this is really important. The stress on the bones causes the bones to grow and to resist the lines of force, meaning where the force is coming in. So we've got weight-bearing exercise, you have gravity coming down onto the earth. But then there's some interesting research on tennis players that showed that the arm that they use to hit the tennis ball, not only are the muscles stronger, which would make sense, that's kind of common sense, but the bones were bigger. And they weren't doing one-armed handstands, they weren't like doing weight bearing on that arm, but they were using the muscles a lot. And so what happens is the muscles are squeezing in on the bones, they're putting this pressure, and there's a line of force, and then the bone cells are basically trying to build up more resistance to that force, and then they get bigger and stronger. So that's very good news, actually. So Wolff's Law, how that relates to exercise. Exercise has been shown to improve the production of bone, but it doesn't affect the reabsorption rate. So the janitors can still work and clean up the dead bone. But you have to do rigorous exercise to create and retain strong bones. It can't be just relaxed. More muscle strength means that muscles are able to exert more stress on the bones, which stimulates their growth. So, of course, more muscle strength is going to bring us lots of benefits in life, but one of those benefits that maybe most people don't know about is that will help strengthen your bones as well. So there are two types of force that build bone. Compressive stress, that's gravity, weight-bearing exercise, jogging, and also the weight of the upper body coming down onto the femur bones, the thigh bones, and then folding and bending. So this is going to compress also. This is going to have a compressing action. Then tensile stress, that's our efforts, the pull of the muscles, a couple different ways. So when the body is off the midline, so if I'm off the midline here, then these muscles in my back are going to have to engage, and that's going to be both strengthening muscles, and there's going to be a pull on the bones in different dimensions as I do that. And we could actually experiment with that right now. So if you want, you could just raise one arm and just be kind of relaxed with that arm. So you're doing the least amount of effort. So your arm is up, you have gravity, you're off the midline, there's a certain amount of effort. Now go ahead and make a fist and really squeeze your arm. So you're contracting the muscles around the bones. So that's the kind of work that we want to do. That's the tensile stress that I'm referring to here. Okay. So yoga provides both compressive and tensile stress. So to stimulate bone growth, we need to do a pose for 12 seconds, which is almost nothing. So that's pretty easy. Maximum 72 seconds, meaning after 72 seconds, you kind of max out there. But then you can rest and do it again. Now, people sometimes ask me, well, how long do I have to wait till I can start the clock again? We don't know the answer to that. I'm sure Dr. Fishman will probably do an experiment on that too, but I don't know the answer to that right now. We don't have that. But he did say that he believes that, yes, you can start the clock again, and the best thing you could do is, if you're doing a yoga practice, you do one pose, then you do another pose, then you do another pose. So you're moving different muscles, you're strengthening different muscles, and then you're going to be affecting different bones. So it's good to do 10 to 12 minutes daily. 30 minutes is better. And the type of yoga must be vigorous, so hugging the muscles into the bones like we just did in that experiment. So there is restorative yoga, and that's something that I teach also. But restorative yoga, that won't build bone. That's just relaxing. It's to help with stress relief. It's wonderful. I love it. But it won't build bone. And another extra benefit is muscular action also stabilizes your balance. So it's going to strengthen your muscles, it's going to strengthen your bones, and it's going to help your balance. So many different benefits there. So yoga stresses the bones without impact, so it doesn't aggravate osteoarthritis. So when people get osteopenia or osteoporosis, they may be probably at least over 50, maybe over 60. They're at that age where if you say, well, I think you should take up jogging. You should go out and go jogging every day. Well, they may have osteoarthritis at that point in their life. So it doesn't really make sense to give people those high impact activities that they might do when they're 20. So that's one benefit of yoga, that it's not a high impact activity, and it actually can benefit osteoarthritis because through the different movements of the joints and through different range of motion, we're circulating the synovial fluid throughout the joint. So it kind of massages that area, and then the fluid goes throughout the joint, and that nurtures the cartilage, so it keeps the joints healthier. So instead of being an aggravating thing for osteoarthritis, it can actually help. So increasing muscular strength decreases fracture risk, and then it stimulates almost every bone from almost every angle for protracted periods of time. So fracture risks increase with increasing age, with lack of awareness and coordination, with poor balancing skills, because then we may be more likely to fall, and also with poor posture. Once you have a vertebral fracture, then you're predisposed to get another. And that's because what happens is, so we can have a wedge-shaped fracture where you have a vertebra, and then, so let's say in the front part of the vertebrae, let's say this is the front, and it compresses here, so it becomes like a wedge shape or kind of like a triangle shape. And then then you're here, and then so there's already more pressure on that part, the front part of the vertebrae. So then it's easy to get another fracture. So we want to try to avoid any at all. I know there are ways to, there are surgical ways to fix these now that are less intense. My mom had a procedure done, which I don't think I can remember the name of, but anyway, it did help her. But better to avoid them. So how to avoid fractures? Bone solidity is important. Muscular strength, so that's something we have control over. Good balance, which we have to practice. Of course, if we don't use it, we lose it. And then healthy postural habits. So Dr. Fishman's research, he's published a lot. He found that 80% of people in his study improved bone mineral density. There were no fractures or serious injuries, and I didn't put it on here, but he states how many hours of yoga was done by all these people. It was a lot. He's doing a dose-dependent study right now, so kind of like with a medication where you would see, okay, if we give these people twice as much medication as these people, do they get twice as better? So with yoga, he's testing it out now to see if these people do twice as much yoga as these people, do they get twice as much benefit for their bones? So it's in the midst of the process right now. And his pilot study, published in 2009, had 19 patients, average 68 years old. So they did have improvement in their T-scale score. And for the spine, more than 2/3 of a point. For the hips, almost 9/10 of a point. So if you think about -1 score that I mentioned was osteopenia. So if somebody had about a 9/10 of a point improvement, they might move from osteopenia to normal, or maybe they moved from osteoporosis to osteopenia. So he's got measured differences. He had people do DEXA scans every 2 years, and he noticed the difference. Oh, on a completely other topic, he's doing some really interesting research with scoliosis. Amazing, kind of mind-blowing research about how effective it is. Yeah, really incredible. So his full study, which was published in 2016, he had 741 patients over 10 years. So in the 227 people that moderately or fully did the work, that were compliant, they had bone mineral density improvement. There were no yoga-related serious injuries reported, and it was published in 2016. So here are some of the things, if we want to do yoga to benefit our bones, we want to avoid these 5 things. These are very important. And I see people still doing these things, and And sometimes they're my friends, and sometimes I feel like, should I say something? People often don't want unsolicited advice. But I worry about my older friends. So spinal flexion. So flexion of the spine is this. That's going forward. I'm going to do it gently and not in an extreme way because I don't want to risk my own health here. But so you're bending forward maybe from the waist or maybe from kind of the mid to upper back. So that's flexion. Extension is where you're going into a back bend. So flexion is bending forward. So then there's a risk of fracture because when we bend forward, we're putting that extra pressure, we're pressing on the front parts of the vertebral bodies, and that extra pressure could cause a fracture. Now, I can't say that I totally understand this. Why, when we put pressure on bones, do they grow, but then we put pressure here and it breaks? Everything I've studied so far does not really give the answer to that. So maybe we'll find that out more. Yeah?
I'm wondering what yoga pose might involve that flexion.
Yeah, well, boy, there's a lot. There's a lot. But it doesn't have to. That's the thing. It's how you do the pose. The pose itself does not require that bending. Some full forward bends, when you go completely into the forward bend, the back would round. In those ones, I wouldn't worry if someone was completely in the pose, but almost no one has the flexibility to do that. So I don't have pictures of those poses, but I'll see if I can come up. Maybe after I finish, I'll be able to demonstrate a couple things, like a contrast.
Would cat-cow be an example?
Yes, yeah. So cat-cow, most people know about that. So I don't really teach that, and I haven't for years, even before I did any of this study in osteoporosis, because my posture teacher taught me not to do that. She said, that's not good for your back. So I stopped doing it a long time ago. And I had been one of those people who did yoga since college, and I liked to do all the extreme stuff, like whatever the hardest class was, I wanted to do that, and I would do whatever the teacher said. And then I met Jean Couch, my posture teacher, in 1994, I think, and I had to totally change how I did yoga. I realized, oh wow, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm just bending from my waist and making up for lack of flexibility in my hamstrings by bending my spine, which is not good for my spine and doesn't even help my hamstrings. So I changed dramatically the way I did yoga. So I don't teach cat-cow unless I'm trying to, in extreme cases I might. If somebody cannot get the idea of the spine not doing this, then I might teach that. What Dr. Fishman said is that the cow part is probably okay, but the cat part, that's where you're hunching up. And especially when they tell you, like, push up as hard as you can. And I would not do that if I had osteoporosis or osteopenia. I don't do it myself because I don't want to take that chance. So maybe if you're 20, if you're 30, I personally wouldn't do it myself. So fast-paced vinyasa. Does anyone know what vinyasa is? It's like when you link a series of yoga poses together. Like sun salutations is one example, but there's all kinds of examples. And like flow yoga, it's called. That's another term. You've probably heard that, flow yoga. So if it's fast-paced, then we don't really have time to check our alignment and be careful and use props. So I don't do that either. I like to do sun salutations, but I do them slowly with careful attention to alignment. So sit-ups, the classic sit-ups where you're bending from here, constantly bending from here, not good. Unsupported balancing poses. So if your balance is bad and you think, I want to work on my balance, I'm going to just stand in the middle of the room and just start right here. So that would be not a great idea. Instead, if you start with your back to the wall, whether you're leaning against the wall or you're a little forward of the wall, and then you can start to practice something, and then the wall's right there if you need it. So it depends on, everybody's at a different place. Some people might be fine in the middle of the room. Some people might just want a chair next to them. And then inversions without proper preparation, meaning if you've never done headstand, shoulder stand, or handstand, then, if you have osteoporosis and you're 70, that's probably not a good time to start unless you go work with a teacher specially, in person, not from YouTube. So, yeah?
What about spinal rotation and side bending?
Yes, so twists, this is where I think there are a lot of people that have criticized Dr. Fishman for including twists in his program. So if we twist around his spine, that is very risky, very risky. So if you, this is often where people, so not even thinking of osteoporosis, but this is where people, let's say, they say, oh, I just bent over and twisted to pick that thing up, and then I went to the ER, because that's when they herniate the disc or something. So bending the spine and twisting together, not good for any human being, including people who are 15 years old and have strong bones. It's not good for anyone, because it's not only the bones that matter in the spine, it's also the discs, the nerves that are coming out of the spine. All of that is important. So yeah, so I try to be careful. And so twisting, yes, if we twist a straight spine, if we have a column, a straight spine, then what he's shown, and I think this was based on someone else's research, which I won't go into all the complicated things, but they showed that when they applied this rotational action to the spine, that it actually stimulated all the parts of the vertebral bodies, so it was strengthening. So he thinks twists are actually very good, but with that very important caveat that the spine must be straight. Side bending, yes, can be beneficial too. And so then, we're putting a little extra pressure on, let's say, this side of the vertebral bodies, or this side of the vertebral bodies. He does some back bends, so we're putting a little extra pressure on the back edges of the vertebral bodies. He does no poses where we put extra pressure on the front edges, because that's where people get fractured. But he says that in the twists, we are stimulating the whole entire vertebral body. So that's the way we benefit the front part, but we don't do any forward bending at all from the waist.
I was thinking about, I have an older car that doesn't have all the gadgetry for backing up, so I do need to be able to turn.
Right, and well, and not from Dr. Fishman, but from my teacher, Jean Couch. I remember when I first met her, well, it was probably, 1994, 95. And so she gave me a lesson in how to sit in my car. And so I learned how to sit, which we can do at the end of the slideshow, go over how to sit here. So I shifted my position, and then I realized, like, well, I can't reach the pedals. And so I had to slide my seat like 3 inches forward. I couldn't believe it. So I was sitting like this before in my car. And then I had to change the mirrors, everything. I was like, oh my God, this is really weird. So then I drove home, because I worked in Palo Alto and I lived in San Francisco. So I drove home and I had to change lanes at some point, and I turned around and I went, oh my God, I can see way back there. Because before I was all like this and I could only turn like about that much. And then I got my spine straight and my neck and everything. My spine could turn easily, my neck could turn, I could see way farther. And I also noticed that I stopped getting sleepy on my commute, because I used to be like, I would try to tighten my muscles and lift my foot up and do things to try to stay awake driving home. And I was wide awake after that. So because you get blood into your brain through these arteries here. So if your neck is like this, then this is going to be compressing the vertebral arteries. Did I answer all the questions? I'm not sure. Sometimes I go off on a tangent.
That's good.
Okay. Okay, so here's spinal flexion, bending the spine. I took this picture in Mexico. So I went to Mexico I think it was in 2013, to do a yoga for scoliosis retreat for yoga teachers, which was great. And then I went to Zihuatanejo, because it's near Ixtapa. Ixtapa is like a tourist place, but Zihuatanejo is the next town over, and that's where the locals live. So of course, that's where I wanted to find good posture, but this was not good posture. But it's a great example of somebody sitting, one of our students called it sitting like a cashew. So it's like a C, and that's spinal flexion. That's going to be putting too much pressure on the front edges of the vertebral bodies. That's going to be a risk for fracture, and all those other things, herniated disc, nerve problems, bad posture, all of that. So, anyway, I think you can read that. Sit-ups are spinal flexion with pressure. So spinal flexion, bending from the waist, and then there's pressure because he's holding up the weight of his upper body as he does that. So yeah, when we're that young, we can get away with this stuff, and I could get away with a certain amount of things when I was young, but then I can't really anymore. And I'm just a lot more careful now. But yeah, that's going to be dangerous. There are definitely ways we can strengthen our abdominal muscles without rounding the back. So plenty of ways to do that. So this was, I think, also in Zihuatanejo. I got this picture. They were building a hotel, and I saw all these guys building this hotel, and I was just amazed at how gorgeous their posture was. So I took a whole ton of pictures. So here we see he's bending from the hip joints, and look how straight the spine is. So it's a really lovely bend. And so in our culture, we tend to bend from the waist like this, as if we had a ball and socket joint at the waist, which we don't actually. And in healthy cultures, they bend from the hip joints where you do have ball and socket joints. So this is what we see in healthy cultures, like this here. So this is a great bend. The other benefit, in addition to keeping the spine safe, when we bend from the hip joints, the pelvis rotates, and that means the hamstrings get stretched. So people who get tighter and tighter in their hamstrings as they get older and older, it's because they're bending like this. And I don't know if you can see, but they're bending like this, and their hamstrings, no stretch. The only way to get the stretch is you've got to have the pelvis tip like that. So then the hamstrings get long. So these people stay flexible into their old age. So does osteoporosis cause bad posture? So excessive thoracic kyphosis, that's the thoracic is the upper spine, and the kyphosis is the going out, the convex curve. Lordosis is the back bend where it goes in. So that roundedness is a common precondition of osteoporotic fractures. Now, if someone did not have osteoporosis, they may not get a fracture, but we used to think that just you see people like this and you think, oh, they have osteoporosis, but it's not. That's not true. They might and they might not. These days, unfortunately, I'm sure you have seen teenagers with that posture. The posture that we used to think of, oh, that's somebody who's like over 70. Not anymore. In fact, even just in Sebastopol a couple weeks ago, I was walking and I saw a teenage boy, kind of tall, and my mouth almost went open because of how, I don't know, I can't even do it. I think he was walking kind of like this. So, and he did look like he was a teenager. So you can imagine when he's 20, when he's 30, when he's 40, what he's going to look like. And it might seem cool at this age, but he's going to regret that when he's older, for sure. So yeah, it was thought, that roundedness was thought to be the result of the fractures, but we know now that it can actually be a cause of the fractures in people with osteoporosis. And then, of course, it can lead to back pain and definitely loss of height. So I regained some height. I know many students of mine have regained height after doing the posture work. They get themselves aligned. I can show you how you can lose height very quickly. So it's if you push your pelvis forward. See, I just got shorter. You can probably even see where my head goes, and we can actually measure it. So I got taller, right? So if you want to make yourself short, you just push your pelvis forward, and you will get shorter. It works. Okay. So where you have control, improving posture, elongating the spine will reduce the possibility of vertebral fractures. I'm not going to say prevent, but reduce, because we can't prove anything for sure. You can change your posture at any age. You can improve your balance, and you can increase muscle and bone strength. And also, with the posture classes, when I taught in Palo Alto at the Balance Center with Jean Couch, the oldest woman that took the class was 95, and she drove herself to class. I will never forget her. So any age, you can make a change. This is Noelle Perez Christians, and she is the woman who did all this original research. She's from Paris. Well, she passed away a few years ago. And so some of you probably have heard of BKS Iyengar, famous Hatha yoga teacher. So she went to India like in 1959, studied with him. It was very unusual for a single Western woman to go to India by herself, and she lived with him for a while she was studying. And then he told her, watch the women of India, watch how they walk and try to make your shadow look like their shadow. And then he came to her studio in Paris in 1972, and he had some students line up, and he said, Noelle, that student looks like a parenthesis, and this student looks like a question mark, but you should stand like an exclamation point. And she thought, well, how do I do that? And she couldn't really figure out. She tried to ask him, can you explain that? Can you put me in that position? And he couldn't really do it, which was so strange because he was so brilliant with the body, but he couldn't figure that out because he was in that alignment naturally himself. So she did all this exploring and working with her notes, and then she went to look at museum ancient sculptures, and she had the light bulb go off one day, and she realized posture changed from how it used to be years ago to how it is now, and from less industrialized cultures to more industrialized. So she did all this research, and then there are various people that have studied under her who have written books. So a couple of them are, Taya Sawyer's book is back there. Kathleen didn't study with Noelle, I think. Jean Couch, my teacher, did. I've studied with Noelle just once in Paris. And Esther Gokhale, that's another person that studied with Noelle. So there are many people, Angie Thusius, who have studied with her, and she's written like 26 books. They're almost all in French and kind of rambling, but there's a few that are in English. And people are working on trying to translate more of her books, but we owe so much to her. I would be a wreck if she hadn't done her work, and if I hadn't met Jean, I would be a disaster now, my body. I can't even imagine. I don't want to think about it. So modern posture is misaligned. So here we see kind of the question mark, the parenthesis. Notice the pelvis is forward, and look what happens to the upper back. Because the center of the body has moved off center, the pelvis, then everything has to adjust to that, and there's compromise in the shape of the spine. That makes it hard too. But even when they're not on the phone or when they're looking at so then here's another common American thing. And people's heads, I've got pictures too of like heads that are just like here. They're so far in front of the person's body. That's really it's hard on the neck. And then here also, so again, the cashew position, sitting with the back very rounded. So this was great. I thought, well, maybe if I go to the Petaluma Historical Museum, I can find some good posture. I found like 5 photos, that was it. Most of them were like Butter and Eggs Day with 100 people. So I found a few good pictures. So here are 2 of them. So I don't remember what year these are from, but notice that the only bend is from the hip joints. So nowhere in the spine is she bending. And here too. So the long spine, notice how wide the shoulders are in front. Notice that the heads sit on top of the spine. The heads are not in front of the spines. And turning the head, so like talking about driving and changing lanes and turning, that this is how we can do it in a healthy way. So when we see pictures like this, people tend to think, oh, these people are stiff. But then remember, they had to sit there for a long time. They're not going to be like this and holding that for 20 minutes, or I don't know how long they held to hold it for, but it wasn't like just the modern quick photographs. So they look serious, but not stiff. They're actually relaxed. This is the most relaxed way to be. So we did used to have this healthy posture.
Weren't they wearing corsets?
Yes, they may have been wearing corsets, and so with the corsets, I'm not saying they're healthy. Noelle said that her mother wore a corset, and so did she. There was like the whale bones, and she said Noelle was always breaking them because she was bending from the waist. Her mother didn't break hers. So not recommending corsets, but you don't need a corset to be straight, obviously. Yeah, but the corset didn't stop them from having that vertical alignment. Now, it may have damaged their inner organs. That's another question there. And I think some corsets were more cinched than others. So the tighter the cinch, the more damaging to the inner organs for sure. So what we see is that all children up until about age 3 have healthy natural posture. So he looks just like, well, let's just go back and see if it'll do that. So the woman on the right, notice that posture. It's the same. It's the same posture. So all children, all healthy children, all races, all nationalities, they have this posture. And then around age 4, they start to lose it if they grow up in an industrialized culture. If they grow up in a healthy culture, then they'll just maintain their healthy alignment their whole life. But if they grow up in our culture, like there are people I know, and I won't name them, but family members who, after a certain age, you can see it. You can see that the posture's changed after 3. So if you want to learn about healthy posture, the best teacher would be someone in your life who's between 1 and 3 years old. So, and especially like if you go to the beach in the summer, when they're not wearing a lot of clothes. In the middle of winter, it's harder to see if they're all wearing all these ski clothes. But in the summer, because you can see just how lovely their shoulders go back, and the shoulder blades are in together, the spine is long, the heads are not here, the heads are here. They know how to bend, they know how to, it's lovely.
And what is it about industrialized societies that cause this? Is it just the fact that we're sitting in chairs?
No, we thought that. And Jean did a lot of research, and she went to look at sports photographers' pictures. She thought, well, maybe all the great athletes are in good alignment, but not at all. So even very active people had horrible posture if they're from this country. Now, if you look at, I know some people have mentioned with baseball, I can't say I watch baseball or know anything about it, but that some of the players that are from like Dominican Republic or where are they from? Puerto Rico, I'm not sure, that they actually have great posture. So you can take people who are physically active and they come from different countries, and depending on where they grew up, they will have better posture or not. It's because it's what we observe. So when he becomes 4 or 5 years old, then he sees like, oh, on TV, everybody's doing this. In the movies, everybody's doing like this. The cartoons, they draw the cartoons like this too. I've cut out cartoons and like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Everyone around them, the older sister, the older brother, the parents are all like this. So they just adopt it. They just take it on. But if he grew up in Mexico, like this man in Oaxaca, then he would just maintain that natural alignment through his whole life. And what I love here is how the shoulders are back. Look how long the neck is. And the hips are back. There's this vertical column of bones. He doesn't look like a parenthesis or a question mark. He's an exclamation point. And there also is something that Jean used to always say. She would talk about how these people had this dignity. They would just have this quality of dignity. And I really see that. I don't know exactly. It's not something that I can explain. It's just sort of an intuitive thing. But I used to just see these pictures when I first started seeing them, and I would say, wow, I've never seen anyone that looked like that. They look great. They look so healthy. So it was very inspiring. Okay, we're getting near the end. So 2 keys to improving your bones: learn and practice healthy natural posture. We call it original alignment. We used to call it balance. It's called a plomb in Paris, or in Europe. I think the Italian teachers also call it a plomb. So that will reduce excess spinal curvature so that you're not doing this. And do yoga regularly with safe alignment and vigor to strengthen muscles and bones. Those 2 are essential. So if you have vigor but not safe alignment, you can hurt yourself. And if you have safe alignment but no vigor, you won't hurt yourself, but you won't be building bone or muscle. So they're both important. So Dr. Fisherman likes to do this and to have the side effects of medications and then the side effects of yoga. Side effects, So posture improvement, probably. I'm just going to say, depends on how you're doing it. Better balance, mental clarity through healthy breathing, improvement of mood, better range of motion in the joints, increased strength of muscles and bones, reduction in pain, anxiety, and inflammation. Better than the side effects of the bisphosphonates. And then these are just some of the sources for the quotes that I had and the statistics from the book, Yoga for Osteoporosis, from the training I did, this she's connected with the training. And then my posture training at the Balance Center with Noel Perez, the other teachers. And then I just had to include a little bit of humor because I thought, yeah, that's a good question. I love that. That's one of my favorite. Yeah, they can get away with it. That's true. Yeah. So then, okay, so we have 15 minutes, and so we've already had some questions. I can take more questions, but I was also thinking we could do a little practice. So are there any questions right now, or yeah?
Does it matter if your knees are locked or unlocked when you're standing?
I wouldn't lock them, no, but I wouldn't bend them either. So it's soft, is what we would say. Because, yeah, some people hyperextend the knees like I used to, and my yoga teachers would always come behind me and do this to get me to soften. But I've also met people who stand like this, like someone maybe comes to me for a lesson, and then I say, why are you bending your knees? And they said, well, I was told to do that for my back. I said, I wouldn't do it. I mean, you can never relax. You have to work all the time. So with the healthy cultures, we see that these people are always in maximum relaxation. Now, if they want to build bone, you know, they have to do some work. So obviously, to build bone, you've got to do work. But it doesn't mean that you should be in chronic contraction 24/7. That's not healthy either. So Dr. Fishman isn't saying do yoga for 10 hours a day. He said 30 minutes a day. And then you can relax during other times. You don't want to like stand, let's say I'll stand like this off the gravity line so I can work my muscles and strengthen my bones more. Well, you might get stronger muscles, but you're going to create a lot of compression in your spine, and you're going to probably screw up your hip joints. And so, yeah, it's a balance. I like to think of being active when I want to be active, and when I am not, then to relax. And yes?
I noticed Margaret Martin's book. Do you incorporate some of her exercises into your yoga routines?
No, I think I watched one video of hers, but I don't have her book. So
Yeah, I saw the book on it.
yeah, because that was here from last week, and yeah, so I can't speak one way or the other about that because
I really like her work.
yeah, I've heard good things about her. Yeah, I just can't really comment because I'm not too familiar. Yeah. So I thought we could try a bend. Yeah.
I'm wondering about yoga balls, you know, like they're
Yeah.
back over them.
Yeah, I don't like them. So Dr. Fishman hasn't ever recommended them. He hasn't said anything against them, but I know that Jean definitely didn't recommend them, and especially not sitting on them. That's the worst. Like people trying to use them as a desk chair. I remember years ago, and a roommate of mine said, oh, I just got this new chair, and it had this circle thing with wheels, and then you just stick the ball on it. So I thought, okay, let me try this. And so I'd already been studying with Jean and teaching the posture method. So I don't know. I hope people will be able to see me if I'm right here. So my roommate, so I like, let me try this. What's this like? So I sat in and I was like, whoa. And I said, so I have a choice of either collapsing or like tightening my back really tight to just try to sit up straight. I said, I would never sit on this chair. That's just horrible. It's horrible. You have a choice of collapsing or being in chronic tension. I don't want to be collapsed, and I don't want to be in chronic tension. So I don't like either choice. So let's go over, let's do it sitting first, and then we can do it standing for those that want to, and if people don't want to stand, that's fine. So you can actually sit at any part of the chair, back or forward, whatever. And so we used to always teach this in contrast. I don't know if, I'll leave that up to you if you'd like to do it. This is not healthy, so you might not want to do it, but I'll leave that up to each person. What I want to say is if you do the unhealthy part, please do it extremely gently, okay? So if you want, you can bend a tiny bit from your waist and just notice what that feels like. Okay, so that's spinal flexion. Most of us do it every day, throughout the day, so it's probably kind of familiar. Now, relaxing the belly, we're going to bend from the hip joints. So if you put your hands on your hips, now relax the belly, bend forward, and your hands should move. You should feel your hands move towards your thighs. So, and then go ahead and come back up. That would be bending from the hip joints with a straight spine. So let's try that again. Relax the belly, bend from the hip joints. You should feel your hands move. The front of your hips, eventually if you go far enough forward, if that feels okay to you, the front of your hips is going to dig into your thigh bones if you go far enough forward. Okay, and then come back up. So that's healthy bending. And so someone was asking about I don't remember who, about the yoga poses and doing them, do they require a rounded back versus not? So if you imagine I was doing a pose like, let's say I'm sitting on the floor with my legs outstretched, you know, and I'm going to reach forward toward my toes. I have lots of pictures of people doing that like this. And I won't go any further, but just imagine I'm going farther into this rounded position. And that's what I used to do. Like, I have to get my toes. I didn't care if it was good for me. I didn't know it wasn't good for me. I mean, it didn't even occur to me. And then I learned that's not good for you. So I stopped doing it. So now, let's say my legs were out straight. Then I would bend from here, and I would just go as far as I can, and then I just stay there. And I stay up in the air. So maybe it's not the way that it is in the Light on Yoga book, but I can keep my spine straight. And then there's props. There are props that can be used for many different yoga poses, like bolsters, like chairs, blocks, all kinds of things. So that's seated forward bends I'm talking about, and downward dog is another, or let's say one that's pretty easy for people to do. I'll just show you. So downward dog is where you have your hands on the floor, your feet on the floor, and your hips are up, and you're like the letter A. Now you can do, I'm just trying to think where, I'll just do it here. So this is called a right angle pose, and this can be done on a wall, so it's easy, you don't need any props. You have your hands about shoulder height and shoulder width. You walk back your feet, you bend at your hips. So if I was going to do this pose with a rounded back, that would look like this. So I don't have to do it that way, and I don't want to do it that way. So I'm going to stop bending from here and bend only from here. Now I get a better stretch of my hamstrings, and I can get my spine in a column, and then I can really lengthen out and stretch my spine really long. So that's an example of a pose that could be done with a rounded back or a straight back, depending on how you choose to do it. So now that we've done a bend sitting, if you want to try doing it standing up, then we can stand in front of the chair. If you'd rather stay seated, you can just repeat it again sitting in the chair. So have the backs of your legs touching the chair, so you won't end up not on the chair. So we feel the chair behind our thighs, our calves. Relax the belly. Another important thing is when we bend the knees, we want to make sure they go over the middle of the feet. So don't let your knees come in like this towards each other. That's like this. That's really bad for the knees. So knees are going to go right over the middle of the feet. Now, let's go slowly. Relax the belly. Bend from the hip joints, not from your waist. Your butt bones move back, 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 back. Bend your knees. You can take a hold of the chair, and then put the front of the pelvis on the chair seat. So I'm exaggerating a little bit. So you can see here, I'm bending from the hip joints. I'm keeping the spine straight, putting the front of the pelvis on the chair so that I end up then on the chair like that. So I don't go this slowly, and I don't exaggerate this much in normal life. If I'm just going to sit in the chair, I'm not going to go this slowly, but otherwise I can go slowly like this. Then maybe I'm not all the way at the back of the chair, so I can do this again, bending from the hip joints. If you're not all the way back on the chair, lift up and scoot all the way to the back of the chair. So then if you're all the way at the back, then, and these chairs are pretty good. I mean, if this were my chair, I need to fix a little something. It needs a little something right here. But the seat of the chair is great. I love these kinds of chairs. So now we just relax the back and drop. So I'm not going to try to sit up straight, which isn't actually straight, but it's what people think of as straight, lifting the chest. So you just relax. You just relax and don't work your back. Just rest. The bones hold you up. Bones are stronger than steel, pound for pound. So I don't need to be here, but I don't need to be in back bend. But what I also really want to not do is this. As soon as the pelvis comes forward, then look what happens to my upper back. And my head has to go forward. That's just physics. Why does my head have to go forward? Because, okay, let's say you say, why don't you keep your neck in line with your spine? Okay. All right, there we go. How long do you think I can hold that? Like, not a minute, probably. 30 seconds, maybe? It's like, ooh, I'm already feeling it. So, of course, the head has to come forward. You're going to round your upper back. Your head will go forward. Your neck will be projecting out. Why does your head go forward? The pelvis. The pelvis is out of alignment. It's not under the spine anymore. It's in front. So this is the cause. The cause of everything is here. So then what do I need to do? I need to get up. And so we used to call it figging. We don't really call it that anymore so much, but thinking of the fig leaf area, like in the Bible, Adam and Eve. So, because people were confused if we said pelvis. So Jean said, like Adam and Eve, like fig leaf. So you just lift up, you aim that fig area onto the chair seat, you come back up, and then you're on your sits bones. So you want to sit on your sits bones, not your tailbone. Tailbone should not be something that has contact with the chair. It's in the, well, in this chair, for me, it's hanging off the edge there. In another chair, that might be different, but you want to be on the sits bone. So the pelvis then provides the base for the spine. The spine then just rests. It just sits like a column on top of the pelvis. It has a straight shape then. So any questions about all of the sitting, the bending and the sitting? Yeah? Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Oh, you can see. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Right here? Okay. Yeah, so bending from the hip. We could all try it again if whoever wants to. So standing, backs of the legs touching the chair. Relax the belly. We're going to bend the knees and from the hip joints. Make sure your knees don't go in towards each other. You can take a hold of the chair, and then you aim the front of the pelvis, fig leaf area toward the chair. Then, if you're not all the way back, then you just bend again at the hip joints. You lift up, scoot farther back, and then you rest. You let your back totally rest against the chair. So if in a perfect world, if I wanted this chair to be just perfect, what I would do is I would take, it needs about like this much, not a ton, something right in the middle, because it comes out here and it sinks a little bit here, which isn't totally comfortable for me. So I'm just going to try that. So if anybody has a jacket, you could try that yourself. And see, now I feel like I could sit here for hours. This feels really, really good. So you were able to see? Okay. Yeah. So we just have a couple minutes. Yeah?
What do you say shortly rather than I think sitting the same?
I don't. I perch when I'm on my computer, just because I'm using my arms, and if I'm leaning back, because see, these chairs all lean back, right? Which is fine if we're listening to a lecture or watching a movie. It's fine to have that little lean, but for using my hands and working on the computer, then it just feels like, whoa, then it's awkward. So I perch, but I sit on a wedge. So I'm at the front, bit of my chair on a wedge. And then my back is here, not here. So when you're leaning back, your spine can be straight, but you're at this angle. But at the computer, I like to be at this angle. So I'm on the wedge, and then I'm like that. Yeah.
Why do you need to be on a wedge?
Why? Because here, when you're here, the chair back is, so my pelvis is right on the chair back. So it's holding me in place. Like if I was relaxed here and you just took away the chair back, I would fall backwards, right? So the chair is holding me up. Now if I'm here, there's no chair to hold me up, no back. So what will happen for most people, not everybody, but for most people, as they sit, they'll start to go like this. And that's what I used to do. And then I'd be like, oh, whoops, be like sore neck. So the wedge tilts your pelvis for you, so you don't have to be tightening your back to do that tilt. So it's just relaxing.
So it's tilting you.
It's tilting it anteriorly, which means the anterior front part is going down. Yeah.
Sleep position.
Sleep, yeah. Well, we have like 1 minute left. So you can sleep on your side, you can sleep on your back. We don't generally recommend sleeping on the stomach because it's kind of hard on the neck. I used to do it sometimes, but I don't anymore, just too much on my neck. So the side or the back, and actually sleeping on the side is a lot like this exact position here. It's just not as much bend at the hip joints. So yes, I used to sleep that way. Before I met Jean, I would sleep all curled up in a fetal position. Now, what do you think that's going to do to your spine, especially 8 hours of that in a row? That's a lot of rounding. Yeah. So once I learned that, I stopped. And changing the way you sleep is not necessarily easy because you're asleep. I mean, you can't like think, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm asleep. But amazingly, it changes. The more that you sit like this, the more that your body gets used to this position if you stop sitting like that. And then what I would do is align myself in bed, and then every time I'd wake up, like if I had to go to the bathroom, I'd get back in bed, okay, realign myself. Every time I caught myself like this, which you can see what that's going to do for your shoulders, I would say, okay, shoulder back and down, hand here. I didn't like it at first. I kind of rebelled against it. But I just thought, it just made so much sense, like, yeah, I need to do that. And I just did it. And eventually, this started feeling bad. This, which used to feel comforting, started to feel like, oh, that feels really bad now. I don't want to do that anymore.
So is that on your side? Are you?
Yeah. I'm imagining like I'm sleeping on my side, but it would be like this.
So if you're sleeping on your side, you're not losing any.
You have a pillow like right here. Here would be the pillow. So kind of not bent as much as in the chair. So kind of maybe like this. So kind of like this.
When you were talking about a wedge, do you mean when you're sitting as a wedge, or you have a wedge there? Some physical.
Oh, I'm sitting on a foam wedge.
Okay.
Yeah, which unfortunately all the foam shops closed around here, so it's very frustrating. But if anyone, I could maybe, well, the best place I know that might still be open is in Berkeley, Famous Foam Factory. I love their wedges, if they're still open. So I think we have to stop. So thank you for coming, and hope you can practice what you learned.